Now, more on that delay to the deal between Israel and Hamas to release 50 hostages and a pause in fighting for 4 days in exchange also for the release of 150 Israeli-held Palestinian prisoners. I'll put my teeth back in. Still with me is Candice Holdsworth, and joining us now in the studio to discuss all of this is IDF Reserve Captain Eyal Biram. Good afternoon to you, Eyal, and thanks again for joining us this morning and this afternoon, Candice Holdsworth. There was a real hope and expectation, particularly, let's face it, from the families of those women and children who are among those 50 hostages we believe were going to be released today, that we would see this starting from this morning. That's not looking like that is happening. We're looking at least a 24-hour delay. Do we know yet why there has been this delay in this exchange of hostages and prisoners?
It's good to be here again. And I think what we woken up today for another miserable day in the last 48 days is since Hamas launched their attacks. And it's important to mention that as Hamas didn't tell us when they're going to launch the attack and they didn't inform the Israelis who live there on the border, they even right now are not expected or happy to make any negotiation in releasing the hostages. And we are speaking right now not about soldiers and everyone who held by Hamas. We're speaking about children, about babies, about women, about innocent people that were kidnapped from their houses. And this is very important to understand that Hamas is not interested in making them, releasing them, going home. And this is part of the problem.
They took the hostages to get to this point. I mean, this was a deliberate aim. It wasn't by accident. Oh, God, we seem to have gone in and massacred and raped and tortured and burnt people to death. And we seem to have accidentally come home with 240 hostages. It was a deliberate part of the aim of what they did on October the 7th, so that they could bargain with these people and their lives. Some of them, by the way, the youngest 10-month-old baby, for goodness sake. I mean, harrowing stuff. We know that the 50 who are likely to be released are women, children, some elderly, mothers, young children, some, whole families almost. But it's thought that there may be some 40 more women and children who are being held. I'm not feeling very hopeful, frankly, for the men who are being held. These are also all civilians. We know there are female as well as male IDF fighters. But we're often being told, well, and it's women and children who are going to be released by Israel. Well, it's women, prisoners, but also, when you say children, they are largely males under the age of 19. So you're looking at 16, 17, 18-year-old males who have been held in Israeli prisons for committing some even terrorist acts.
Yeah, we're not speaking about innocent people in the
Israeli prison. Not about 4-year-olds being grabbed from their homes.
Yeah, we cannot even compare between 10-month-old baby or Emily, 9 years old, that her father was on this channel 2 days ago, Tom, to people who committed terror attacks and were arrested by the Israeli forces. Of course, there is no way to compare it, but still, when we are looking in the images of this 50, hopefully 30 to 50 people who's supposed to be released in the next few weeks, it's just heartbreaking. I'm thinking about each one of these families and the over hundreds of families who just wait to understand what's happened with their loved ones.
Yeah, I cannot imagine how these families are coping with all this. Again, as you said, the father of one of the girls talking about how, she must be crying for her dad. She doesn't know where she is. She's being held by strangers, probably most likely in tunnels underground, while above her bombs are dropping. I mean, I can't imagine anything more awful for your child. The hope against hope is getting these people, these children, these women home. We're told by the Israeli government that they're not going to be told in advance, much in advance, who's going to be released. But when they do find out, probably the day before, they are going to keep those names private until they have these women and children in safe custody, and they know that they're safe, and then inform the families, because so many hopes are going to be raised, so many hopes dashed. Whereas on the other side, of course, Israel has released the list of the names who are being considered for release from their jails to release the Palestinians. So there may well still, some objections from Israelis saying, well, this person, killed my child in a terrorist attack. I don't really want them to be released, but we're pretty sure this is going to go ahead. There has been some concern that this is handing too much power to Hamas. Now, the urge to get particularly these children home is so strong. And yet, Hamas is using those children to do this. There are real sort of pulls and pushes going on in Israel about allowing Hamas to have this much power and control over the timetable, over how many are released, who is released, when they're released. Perhaps being able to say, well, it was going to be 12 or 13 on Friday, but actually it's only going to be 2. So we're not going to get enough out. So maybe you have to extend that 4-day, partial ceasefire by another day and then another day. Isn't this handing too much control to Hamas?
This is part of the problem. When Hamas initiated this brutal attack on October 7th, they knew exactly what they're doing. They send their terrorists with 2 main goals. First of all is to murder as much as people as they can, and they murdered 1,400 people. And in addition for it is to kidnap people who looked, kids or innocent people from the houses. And this is part of their strategy. Should we go with their strategy or should we don't consider it? I think this is a challenging problem and a challenging situation.
But there's massive pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu, isn't there, the Israeli Prime Minister, to get these hostages home.
We should do all our capacity. And it's just showing us the 2 main goals why this IDF operation started in the Gaza Strip is important, because first one, without the IDF operation on the ground, Hamas will not even open for negotiate. He will take the same situation as the Israeli hostages that was there for 5 years, Gilad Shalit. And right now we speak about hundreds of people, not one soldier. And the second part is that we do understand that if Hamas would stay living in the border and controlling the Gaza area, there will be no future for Israel. And that's why, again and again, we understand that if Hamas in the Gaza Strip, the future of Israel is in a very complicated situation. And we hope that many other organizations, especially the UN one, that's been silent in the last few months and did not say anything, not the women's rights organization, not the kids' rights organization. Not
they're all speaking up now, aren't they?
They're speaking about what's happening in Gaza, but they cannot even mention for one time. What about the rape of the women that been raped in the houses in the Gaza area, in the Israeli villages? What's happening with the kids held by Hamas? Of course, with the hospital that's been used for being the compound of Hamas. And just yesterday, we saw the tunnel that's been found in Shifa Hospital. And
I noted, by the way, that the BBC that had been poo-pooing that and pretty much basically spouting an awful lot of Hamas propaganda, they chose on that day, and I thought it was absolutely astonishing on the Today programme, yes, other radio stations are available, that they actually chose to go with the terrible, terrible plight of people on the West Bank, what they were going through, not going with what everyone else knew was a lead story. Let me bring Candace Holdsworth in on this, because David Cameron, Lord Cameron, the now Foreign Secretary, he has been travelling the Middle East. He's arrived in Israel. He's been visiting the kibbutz Be'eri in Israel. This is one that was under attack, and he's spoken about some of those horrors that he has seen. And it is really important, isn't it, that we do keep stressing how we got here. Yeah. Let's have a little watch and listen to what Lord Cameron has had to say, and then get your reaction to that, Candace.
I wanted to come here myself to see the horrific nature of the attacks that you suffered on October the 7th, and they are absolutely horrific. I mean, the terrorism, parents shot in front of their children, children shot in front of their parents. I've heard things and seen things that obviously I will never forget, and it's important we understand that.
Candace, also, that's it. It is important that we understand that. Now, I've been invited yet again to this horrific 45-minute show reel, effectively, of the most brutal video evidence. And a lot of it, by the way, from Hamas, for goodness sake, CCTV, body cams and things. And I have to say, tell me off as a journalist, but, as a mum, I won't ever sleep at night. I'm willing to trust the independent journalists who've seen these videos, how horrific they are. We know it, but it's amazing how many people I sit on social media, some of the horrific stuff I see on social media. People just, they're still saying a load of this stuff is made up.
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, it's very interesting because we were talking about social media, and I do think things like TikTok have played a huge role in this, because I don't...
Who owns TikTok?
Well, yes. And, for a lot of people, October 7th didn't even happen, or it was some...
Like the Holocaust.
It was propaganda. It's not real. And I promise you, there are so many people with strong opinions on this issue who are not informed of the relevant facts at all.
They're living in their tiny little, little echo chambers, aren't they? And this is a real problem, because I've seen... And this always happens with Israel. They can be under attack, something can happen, and they are given a certain bit of leeway by Western governments. And then, the Brits, the EU, America and others say, oh, actually, rein it in. And everyone spouts this nonsense, oh, you have a right to self-defence. Well, self-defence involves destroying Hamas. Except when you start trying to destroy Hamas hide behind civilians, and then you're a genocidal, Israel is a genocidal government, bent on social, ethnic cleansing is what is being claimed. how does Israel defend itself if it is required to allow a terrorist organisation that has done what it has done, and has said, we'd do it again tomorrow if we had the chance, to sit there on its border? No other country would be expected to put up with this.
No other country. And that's why I think the hypocrisy that we feel all over the world, not just by the UN organization that we spoke about, by the BBC, but maybe media channels, and of course many countries, especially the Arab countries, that understand that Hamas is part of the Muslim Brotherhood. And this Muslim Brotherhood is part of the situation that happened in the Arab Spring, that most of them understood that their own governments are in threat. So right now they are turning their back to Israel. They think that Hamas is not a threat for them, but we do understand, as the son of Hamas founders just said yesterday in the UN, that if Hamas will not be one, it's going to be a message for many other organizations, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, that this is the right time to attack Western democracies, that we are weak. That we are weak here in the streets in London.
And they're right. We are.
We are weak. We do not understand that people who call for jihad in the streets of London will be a threat for this country, similar for what's happening in Gaza.
And this idea that, everyone living in Gaza wants peace, and it's just these horrible, nasty Hamas people, but, you can understand they did what they did, raping and torturing people. You can understand that because of, the subjugation they've been under. The reason why there's a fence there and the reason why the bomb is because they're trying to bomb Israel. The only reason why there haven't been tens of thousands of Israelis killed is because of their ability to defend themselves from those rockets. It's still the same number of rockets coming over. But this idea that, look, I don't want any civilian, certainly a child in Palestine, a Palestinian or anyone in Gaza or the West Bank to die or be hurt by any weaponry. But the reality is they are living under this organisation that a huge number of them do support. Now, that may be because of the propaganda they've been taught. They are educated. They're taught, kids dressing up as terrorists. There are rewards paid to the mothers of young men who suicide bombers. We are dealing with an ideology that is not just a danger to the people of Israel, it is a danger to the West. And we've got to wake up to this and not call everyone who goes, I think this might be a problem, folks, a bigot or an Islamophobe.
I would like to give a tip for the BBC correspondent in Israel, the one who stood next to the MRI system in Al-Shifa hospital next to a rifle and said, this is what Israel is considered to be Hamas weapons. Of course it's Hamas weapon. Of course the tunnel is Hamas.
Oh, we don't know. We couldn't as a journalist, we couldn't verify that.
It was very easy for the BBC to verify that the Islamic Jihad didn't shot the rocket that killed 1,000 people, as discovered to be 10 just after. So my tip for the BBC is to ask the right question. And the right question for the people in Gaza is, do you support Hamas? They don't want to ask it because they understand that if they will ask it, the answer will be, yes, of course I'm supporting it. And the conclusion would be, we have a much fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is the education that the Palestinian people have been educated for decades. And that's why Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, just a few days ago released an official announcement that Israel is the one who killed the people in the music festival. My friend, my pal Adam...
I see this all the time on social media. People are messaging me all the time saying, look at this evidence, and it was Israeli forces, the helicopter came in and fired and killed all those people.
It killed the helicopter killed them, and then he took them to Gaza to make them abducted by Hamas. It's very logic. Of course, the people who say it do not want to say clearly that the threat for the Western world is the threat for Israel right now. And they're just saying clearly that the blood of Jewish people is not considered to be equal for other blood of other people around the world. And that's why it's terrifying me.
I'm genuinely terrified at the moment as well about all of this. I'm going to be attending that solidarity march with Jewish people in this country. And again, it's not a supporting Israel march or anti-Palestinian march. We see pro-Palestinian marches every Saturday, but it is about showing solidarity with people who are really, really scared right now. We're going to be talking more about anti-Semitism on university campuses coming up in a few minutes. But Candace Holdsworth, I mean, do you think there is just a double standard constantly in Western governments and Western media about what the expectations are of Israel vis-a-vis other governments who are under attack, like other countries under attack, but also actually doing this well, on the one hand Hamas and on the one hand Israel. These are not equivalents.
Well, that's the key phrase, right? I mean, always constantly drawing equivalence. And there isn't equivalence. There absolutely is not equivalence. I mean, even looking at people, even with this, the hostages being released, people describe it as a hostage exchange. No, it's not a hostage exchange. I mean, you've got babies and toddlers being released, and you've got people who have been convicted of crimes on the other hand, being released. There's not an equivalence there.
I thought it was an extraordinary thing when you said Israeli soldiers, shot this boy. Yeah, he's a 17-year-old. He's throwing stones at the soldiers. You say, we're going to shoot if you don't stop throwing stones. They carry on throwing these massive big rocks. You know what? I think that's probably an easy way of not getting shot. Don't throw rocks at soldiers with guns. I think it works for most people.
I think a lot of where it comes from as well is, as we've seen, people have these very rigid ideas of oppressor versus oppressed, and it leads them to sort of sympathise with anyone that they believe is sort of attacking the powerful, and they lack moral clarity in that regard because they have these very rigid ideological ideas.
Yeah.
And you see it all over the world. I mean, years ago with Robert Mugabe, people refused to see him for who he was because he was seen as a liberation figure.
Yeah, and this is the thing. It's like, freedom fighters as opposed to terrorists. Let's call people what they are.
Let's call them what they are. And I hope many over-challenged like TalkTV will say it so clearly.
Yeah, I really do think. I must ask you both, who's paying you to say this? Because apparently I'm on the payroll of the. I think it's the Zionist entity. I'm told for saying what I say. My long-suffering audience will know I always say what I think, whether you like it or not. But it is extraordinary, these allegations. Why are you saying it? Someone must be paying you to say something. I mean, and again, these are just sinister anti-Semitic tropes, and they've been doing the rounds for years. And that's what they are. Eyal Biram, IDF Reserve Captain, thank you very much for joining us. Candice Holsworth still with us, of course.